Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Aaron, and welcome to Canada House. Good to be with you. We're coming up on one of the saddest days in the Jewish calendar. It's called Tisha B'av, the 9th of Av. It's a day of disaster, a day of where it's just destined that nearly everything bad is going to happen. It's a day that commemorates many things, but chief importantly, the destruction of the two temples of God, where God had made his name, God had gathered his people, he had asked his people to gather in front of him annually. It was an incredible place, one of the wonders of the world, beautiful, but destroyed. And so on this day, get into some black. It's an annual fast day. It's 25 hours. On special time, the Jewish people in the Jewish calendar, they add an hour to the day. So this day doesn't have 24 hours. This day has 25 hours of fasting, of contemplating the magnitude and the reasons for why this is. Time and place are very important in the Bible and into God. God creates time, he creates a sacred calendar, God does things inside time, and he also does things in place. That is, he has a land that's special, mountains are special, areas are special, things occur, miracles occur of Jesus in certain places. And the temple was both of those. It was a special time and a special place, and those two things were linked together in the temple. So it's really important to ask, if it was so important, why was it destroyed? What lessons can we learn from this on this day of fasting and thinking and contemplating? Well, the first temple, the reason for the first temple's destruction was pure idolatry. Now, they'd been told that as part of the Ten Commandments, there are no other gods. It's just the Lord. And unfortunately, had ignored the voice of God and had chased after other idols and other gods. And the Lord had reacted accordingly. But in the second temple, after the Jewish people had been taken away into Babylon, they had learnt idolatry can only go in one direction. So when they came back and rebuilt and established the second temple and had begun to what we call the Second Temple period Judaism, where they looked at the text and were studying the Bible, and we get to the invention of the Pharisees and the rabbis and that kind of world, the world of Jesus. Then why was the temple destroyed? We didn't do idolatry. We were obeying the Torah. We were doing the mitzvot. We were guarding the Sabbath and actually sharing our faith with the Gentiles. How did it all go wrong for the second temple's destruction? And their answer was hate without reason. So we loved God, but we didn't love our neighbor. And those two commandments are also linked. Time and place is linked. Loving God, loving your neighbor are linked. And if you don't love your neighbor, then we don't care how many commandments you're keeping, because you really don't love God either. And so loving God and loving your neighbor are very, very important. And idolatry and all of this greed and love of self, this brings on the wrath of God, and it's pretty terrible. The New Testament talks about the wrath of God. I'm just going to read a section from Colossians. So this is actually Colossians chapter 3. We discover that the wrath of God is active. And here we go. Paul, chapter 3, is asking us to put some things to death, like get rid of these things in our life. And notice they're all the things that have caused the destruction of the temple. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. There's a lot of selfishly motivated sins, plus greed, which is idolatry. Because upon these, the wrath of God is coming. Now, because I read this in English, we often assume this is future. But the wrath of God here in the Greek is present tense. God is actively working right now, today, against these things. Do we often see it? No, but he is working against them. And so this day, we need to have ourselves a very healthy fear of the Lord. Love the Lord your God, but also fear the Lord your God. Now, we often misread the word fear, thinking we're supposed to quake and shake. That's not quite right. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That we understand that God is love, and His mercy, and He's gracious, and He's compassionate, but He's also an all-consuming fire. He judges, and He is actively working against evil. His wrath is present in the world. Now, if the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, then what is wisdom? I hear you ask. Well, who's the man that asked for wisdom? Solomon. So when Solomon was a young lad, not more than 12, he went to Gibeon and he worshipped the Lord there. And there God asked him, what do you want? And in 1 Kings 3, verse 9, 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 9, he asks, give me a discerning heart so that I can lead your people. Now, the word in Hebrew is lev, heart, lev, shamea. Give me a heart that hears. We often sometimes translate that as give me wisdom. But what is wisdom? Wisdom is a heart that hears. So on this day, as we're contemplating the wrath of God, the fear of the Lord, our role in not loving our neighbor as perhaps we should, then what we want to do is hear the heart of God, hear His love, hear His commandments, hear His correction. And if we hear the word of God, then surely, as Jesus says, blessed is he who hears my words and does it. So we need to hear the word of God and put it into practice. Blessings from Jerusalem.